Welcome to the Life of Tashmia. I'm Tash. Today I have one of my best friends, Adam, here to chat with me about all things open, poly, and ethical non-monogamous. So please welcome me and hi, Adam.
Hello, everyone.
So just to give people a little bit of a background of like who you are and how you got into the kind of open and ethical non-monogamy world.
Okay. Wow, big, broad questions to start. Who I am, I guess I'm a creative living in Sydney. Been, just trying to make a living as a creative in all shapes and forms for the past 2 decades. How I got into E&M, funnily enough, was after a chance meeting with yourself. I guess it was interesting. It's something that I had always wanted from a relationship, but I guess didn't know how to articulate that and didn't really understand what it meant also. And so I had kind of brought it up to partners in the past. And I think it's also like the most common thing I hear when I speak to other people about E&M. They're like, yeah, no, I've tried that. I was like, I asked my missus if she could do threesomes and she didn't want a bar of it. I'm like, that's not the way to go about it. And I think whenever I had kind of broached the topic, I kind of received like a lot of, negative feedback. It was like, what's wrong with you? Like, there's something wrong with you if you don't love me and just me. It's like, no, I love you, but I want to explore sexual connections with other people. I don't think I would have been even half as eloquent as that when I brought it up back in the day. And so, fair play to my exes who, weren't, I guess, on board with it. But, and so for a while there, I did start to believe, is there something wrong with me? Started getting counselling and everything and realised, no, there's nothing wrong with me. And I think it was once I had met you, I was like freshly single out of a relationship and on the dating apps, and you had popped up. So, we went for dinner and I think we were chatting and kind of got into it, what's gone wrong in your last relationships? Why are we sitting here today talking to each other? And I think you had kind of just positioned it like that. It's, I believe in love and building a life with someone and having that primary partner, but I really love to explore, connections with other people. And it was the first time that I'd ever heard it, reciprocated, and especially from a female perspective. So, because at first I thought, oh, maybe it's just a man thing because, we've got testosterone and all this kind of stuff. So we're hornier than girls, which we know is not true. And so, I think we started dating, and I guess we soon figured out that I wasn't ready for a relationship, be it open or anything at that point. And I think I just, spent, a good couple of years being single and figuring out my own stuff and what I really wanted from a relationship. And, so that was like, I think when I was like 30, I'd kind of made that decision. And so I would say it would have been a good 3 years kind of figuring myself out and what I want. I'd been in relationships back to back since I was 18 kind of thing. So kind of took that time to figure out who I was and, what kind of relationship I was looking for, and then started kind of actively looking for that.
I think, when we were, even having that first conversation, it was quite early on. Like E&M and open wasn't really discussed as it is now. And so, when you probably were having conversations with people, bringing it up, most people at that point would have probably thought there's something wrong with you because it wasn't talked about, it is now. And I think most people who were kind of going through E&M or open or poly or whatever, a decade or so ago, and of course there were people living that lifestyle already, but it wasn't out in the open, at some point went to seek help, because I went to a counselor during it, am I a sex addict? That's where I went. And then we worked out, I'm not a sex addict. That's not what this is about. So it's funny that, before it was really widespread and talked about, people's result was, oh, there must be something wrong with me. And I think you also mentioned, like, am I going to find anyone like this? And I definitely went, and you saw me go through this. I went through a lot of relationships before I found like the healthiest one I've ever been into, which is now to my current husband. And it's actually quite hard to find the right partner in that situation, especially back then. I mean, a little bit easier now. When you were like single and like starting this journey and dating and finding out what you want, like what were some of the issues you encountered, maybe with yourself, maybe in the partnership to get the relationship? Like what were the challenges you faced?
I think, first of all, although I had decided what I wanted, I still found it hard to communicate. I mean, in my past relationships, I was notorious for being a bad communicator. And that was something that I kind of discovered, later on. So even though I, wanted E&M and understood that it took communication and a lot of openness, I still found it hard to bring that up. So I think, initially it was like, when do I tell somebody? Which now I know it's straight away. Where before I was like, oh, maybe I'll wait because then I'd speak to people and people, oh no, that's too much to dump on somebody in the first date. I think a lot of, even like monogamous dating, a lot of people are too hard to talk about the serious questions at the start because it makes you look like a psycho, or it makes you, but it's like, no, you just know what you want, and, and you're sharing that and being open with that. So the other person can choose whether or not they want to commit to being on this journey with you. So I'd learned the hard way of bringing it up too late a couple of times. And so after that, I was like, okay, it's literally going to be one of the first things that's
how I used to date. I'd literally sit down and like probably the second thing out of my mouth was, I don't believe in monogamy. They're like, what? And I'm like, I don't believe in monogamy. And I'm like, take it or leave it. Hit the highway. Because I got to the point where I had done that, not said it so early on. And then I ended up in monogamous relationships. So I was like, well, that method, hoping that I could bring it up later, but I realized that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. You can't expect to implement something into a relationship if it wasn't on the table from the start.
Yeah. And then I think the second challenge was then meeting people who weren't seeking that type of relationship, but then, they've had different experiences in their past relationships. So thought, okay, yeah, maybe I could date this person because it means I can practice like detachment and so then I guess you become like a little science project for their own, emotions. It'd be that, or, they would kind of agree to it and, 3 months down the line be like, so you're just kidding about the E&M thing, right? Like we're a thing. And I'm like, no, this is me. And so
I'd get that 3-4 month mark, but they wouldn't think I was kidding. They'd just start freaking out because they'd agreed to it. And then they're like, oh, yeah, I can. Well, a lot, especially if you're approaching it, I was doing it more. There was one girl, but there was more men. And I was approaching it from, I think for men, they were looking at like, oh, my God, like unless they ran for the hills, that was one option. The ones that stuck around were like, oh, my God, it's like my dream scenario. I can sleep with other people, and then they fantasize it. And then 3-4 months later, when I've been with other people and they're like, oh, fuck, I can't handle this.
Yeah.
So that's the other one. So I think that's hard. But it must be something around that 3-4 month point where people are like, oh, this is real.
Yeah. Yeah, the reality sets in. And
did you ever, because I got to the point where I had to, even once I started the dating, sometimes I would occasionally really like someone, but they weren't into the lifestyle. And there was a choice between my lifestyle and the person I liked. And luckily, I would always eventually end up choosing the lifestyle at that point in my life. Did you have to make that decision sometimes?
Yeah, let's say I relapsed. I relapsed into monogamy once. Met someone, I think we had spent like 2 weekends together. This was, early days. And I mentioned it on the third time we hung out and they were not for it whatsoever. And somehow we had this conversation and it ended up as, well, let's just date each other and get to know each other and then figure out where we want to go from there. So we were dating and in my mind, I'm like, I can convince them that this is a safe place and they'll come into my lifestyle, and they're thinking the opposite. So we got a couple of months down and didn't work out.
So what attracted you to this type of lifestyle, like initially? Like what was it that wasn't working maybe in your past monogamous relationships that work better or work in this lifestyle?
I mean, it's hard to compare because I think the way I was dating previously compared to the way I'm dating now is like chalk and cheese. So I was, dating monogamously, but I was cheating in most of my relationships because I felt like I was attracted to all these people and like wanted to hang out and do whatever. And I never lost any love for my partner at the time. But, I was doing it secretively and lying about it and gaslighting and, just being a dick, just a straight up dick. And I realized that whilst that may have been the lifestyle I was looking for, the reason I was doing that wasn't because I was seeking an EM relationship. It was because I was wildly insecure. And because of those insecurities, I was like, well, I don't think, I deserve this person. And so, I'll go around and do all these other things, boost my confidence. I was operating off sexual gratification for a lot of things. And that's the way I was kind of like protecting myself. And then if I wasn't happy in the relationship, instead of talking about it, I would then let them know that I've cheated and then end the relationship and think, okay, well, that's a nice clean break. At least they're not going to want to keep getting back with me because I cheated on them, and that's fine. Until my sister sat me down once and she said a sentence I'll never forget. She's like, yeah, I don't like, you're an idiot, blah, blah. But then she said, don't you realize you're leaving a trail of destruction in your wake?
Wow.
And so for me, what I thought was to be, a harmless kind of crime, or if anything, I've done them a favor. She's like, yeah, but now you've given these women trust issues for the rest of their life, and that once I kind of understood the ramifications of that, I was like, fuck, okay, I'm an asshole. We got to change. We got to do things better. And so now, since, approaching these scenarios or approaching dating, being a lot more open and honest, it just feels like the weight of the world is off your shoulders, and you're not looking behind your back. You're not feeling nervous. You're not anxious about anything. And I mean, don't get me wrong. There's still a certain level of uncertainty and anxiety that you deal with when your partner is seeing other people and everything like that. But at least you're talking about it. And
I think it's a different type of uncertainty because it's not a secretive uncertainty. It's having to deal with emotions that we're not brought up to know how to handle because we've been brought up in a certain way in society, and we're not brought up to know how to deal with the butterflies in your stomach you might get when your partner's out with someone and you're sitting at home that night. So I think that kind of nervousness and uncertainty is very different from I'm going out to cheat on my partner and they don't know, I could get caught, I could hurt this person. I think they're very different levels of uncertainty. But I think you said a really good point about, it was very insightful. You said I was cheating or being dishonest because I was insecure. It came from a place of insecurity. I think a lot of people cheat for that reason. And, Esther Perel talks about, why people cheat. And she's like, it's generally not about their partner, which I think most people can agree on. It's generally because they're chasing a different version of themselves that other person that they're with for that time is making them feel. So it does come down to not having self-love for who you are at the time and not being secure in who you are at the time. So I think that's really insightful to realize the reason you were doing it. So
yeah, it felt like just me as a person was a whole mask. There was this whole macho energy that I was trying to put out there. And, a lot of the guys that I used to idolize around that time were saying much macho guys, banging heaps of girls, blah, blah. And that was, if you could do that, you were cool. And, you get older and you realize that's not cool. And I think the more that I've embraced like the feminine qualities that I have, and just operated differently, operated honestly. Like I feel more of a man than I ever did under that facade, kind of thing. So, yeah, these days it's a total different game, and it's just much more enjoyable for all parties because they know where they stand, I know where I stand, and yeah, it's fun.
Obviously, you said, you really had to do a lot of learning in like the soft skills before like got on this journey. So like improving your communication, obviously being a bit more self-aware, probably knowing feelings, emotions a bit better. If someone's at home and they were like where you were before, how did you learn these skills? Like was it just practice makes perfect? Was it reading? Was it therapy? Like how does someone actually get better at these skills?
I think it was a combination of a lot of things, right? So yeah, some research, online research, friends and family. Like I think a lot of what I learnt was from you, which was like really great. And even the times that we're dating and I was still being a dickhead, like instead of you just launching at me, you kind of told me why I'm being a dickhead and what I should do to not be a dickhead. And I always just have had a lot of like female friends as well, and so then just having like honest conversations with them, I was able to just like hearing their stories and how other guys have treated them and what they were doing, and just seeing myself in some of their stories and seeing how it's affecting them. So I think I was really kind of lucky in that regard. Like a lot of guys, if you don't have like female friends or around you, you're not really going to get that perspective.
And I think it's interesting you said at the beginning, how other guys are like, yeah, I brought it up to my missus. I wanted a threesome. Like so many guys just don't get that's not what it's about. Yeah. Also, do you find that like those guys that were saying it, when you say back them, or would you do one for her? What's their answer?
Yeah, no. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah, I think over the range of people that I've spoken to, I feel like women are more inclined to it than men. Where men think they're more inclined to it, but their partner's not. And in reality, yeah, women will be able to handle it more so than men. It's just this ego thing. The most common thing is like, why would I want some other guy fucking my pussy or whatever? It's like, bro.
You don't own it. What ethical non-monogamous styles have you kind of explored and which ones resonated best with you? So in regards to just open relationships, casual, open, just ethical non-monogamous, so it's purely physical, and all the way to the scale if you have been or consider yourself poly.
Yeah, so I would say, starting out, I was like solo poly, and then that was pretty much the bulk of it, to be honest. And until like, as I said, I was doing some E&M relationships, but again, they were kind of short term and the other person wasn't kind of quite on board. So it wasn't until I met my current partner and I was like, just got to let you know I'm poly. And they're like, I'm poly too. I was like, great. So we didn't have that whole like learning phase, that whole education period to go through. And from there, it's just been us evolving our style and our boundaries as we go. So it's funny because we've always labeled ourselves as poly, but we've more so been operating just more so like open, I guess, because most people that I date, it's very like casual or one or two, or, I have people that I've been seeing even since before my partner, but it's very kind of like spaced out, every couple of months, we're all busy, But yeah, I don't know, it'll continue to evolve. Like sometimes we close it up, sometimes we open it. It just all depends. And I think that's one common misconception that I always hear when I'm like, oh yeah, we're poly or we're E&M, and usually it's like, oh, so you guys are just like fucking heaps of people all the time. It's like, I wish, I don't have the time. But yeah, so that's like the common thing. It's like, no, it's absolutely, not about that. So yeah, I don't know. There is somebody now that I've been dating and we're looking to kind of date a little more regularly. So my partner, myself and them had like a catch up, a couple of weeks ago just to see, and turns out there might be connections there all the way around. But it's something we're still to explore and navigate and talk about. Yeah.
I think it's I've always said in E&M or open relationships, there's ebbs and flows. They're never the same thing. And I've, said it before, there's times in my life I've closed it down. I've said very openly, like post my mother's passing, there was no way I was in the room to bring anyone else into us, and I needed just stability and security for a while. So it's never one state. And I actually don't think any relationship would be just one state. And that's why it's so, because you are having to communicate more in open, ethical, non-monogamous relationship, it means you're always probably going to be having check-ins about it. Like, what am I feeling right now? What are you feeling right now? What are we comfortable with? What are you comfortable with? And then you base what you're doing for then based on that. And then in another couple of months, that might change. So it's not like you're ever one state. And I think that's also, even with polyamory, because my first introduction into this world was me explaining how I felt and someone's naming it for me as, well, that's polyamory. And the way I actually described it was, I don't understand why love is capped to one person. I said, because I said, when you have a daughter, or a child, doesn't matter, could be we love boys too. If I had a second child, would my love for my first child reduce? And society accepts that concept. No, your love grows, right? When you have more children, it's not like, okay, now I love you half because I have another child and then I have another one and I love you even less now. So we accept that concept. I said, so why don't we accept it when it comes to romantic relationships? And then the person said, you're explaining polyamory. I was like, ah. And then, even in my own journey in E&M, I've never been in what I considered a polyamorous relationship yet. And that's because obviously polyamory is when you're having emotional relationships with other people. And I think that is almost like another stepping stone in the game. And I've only really seen it personally done well once. And these people did have a child together and everything, but it took them 7 years to get there. Yeah. And I really took that on board as like, okay, I actually do appreciate this concept, but I actually think and it might not be right for my current partner and I'm not saying it will be one day, but if it was going to be, we're not ready for it. So, and I think it takes quite a long time to get there to be able to do it successfully. Yeah.
So what do you classify your relationship as now? Just E&M?
So, I just say like an open marriage generally because it's the quickest way, because E&M a lot of people don't understand and there's a tongue twister saying ethical non-monogamy. But then our relationship is with, at the moment, not always, we're playing together with other people, but we're also playing separately. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we just play together and not with other people. And then, as you said, life happens. And then I actually recently was seeing, two people actually separately, and I realised I actually didn't have what the other person needed from me at that time. And I kind of had to really do a bit of a reality check of like, I don't have the capacity for a second almost relationship right now. Like my what I can give is quite restricted because my focus is on, at the moment, my business, my brand, and then I am someone who does have a primary. Like not everyone has primaries, but I have a husband. That is my priority. And I have a daughter, so I have a family. And so I think you have to be really realistic with, at the moment, what do I have to give? And maybe in 2 years when I'm in a different place or, I'm not growing my business as much as I am right now, I might have the capacity for something else. But I think just because I can do it doesn't actually mean I should. Yeah. And I think, as you said, like people meet you and think, oh, you must be banging everyone. Yes, I can go and bang lots of people, but do I want to? Yeah. Like whether I'm ethical, non-monogamous or not, I'm probably not going to be doing that. Yeah. I think the other misconception I get sometimes, and I don't know if this happens the reverse to men, is people, as soon as they hear that I'm ethical, non-monogamy or open, like, oh, I'm open, they assume it's a yes. Yeah. Like when it comes to, oh, so you want to go and grab a drink. They assume like
because you've brought that up, that
because
you're
I
ready
brought
to
that
go.
up, it means like, yeah, cool, like I'll have sex with you. And I'm like, I still have choice.
So there'll be times that my partner will just like, give me the signal, and we won't mention it because, they'll pick up a vibe that, yeah, as soon as we mention it, this person's going to think they're in. Like, that is a real thing.
Where do you think most people go wrong when it comes to ethical non-monogamous relationships? Or what has gone wrong for you?
Yeah, I think, I guess when it hasn't worked out, and generally the thing that I hear from a lot of people, it's like, oh yeah, I tried it and it didn't work out. It's that, people haven't entered it into it in the right headspace. Then they're not both in it for the right reasons. And then that just kind of causes friction. Or I think, like I've heard on one of your other podcasts or something before, it's got to be a hell yeah, right? And so people enter it into it without it being a hell yeah, and then that causes friction. Most of the time I've heard it's like, yeah, I agreed to be in it, but I wasn't really that comfortable. And then they just started sleeping with other people, and, there wasn't that communication there. And they're like, well, you agreed to this, so I get the right to do this. And it's just like consent, consent can change at any point,
And trust. Trust is such an important part. And I've said you can cheat in E&M.
Absolutely.
Cheating is not just for monogamous people, because if I do something against my partner's rules, like one of our rules is we always tell each other. So generally it's prior to something happening. So if especially because of the way I actually do date, is I can't really even think of a time I've gone out, met someone and banged them. It's just not how I need to have a connection. So generally I will meet them somehow, arrange for like a coffee or something, meet them, have that, go home, then decide if I want to sleep with them like properly, and then we'll hook up with them when I, when I want. So my partner will always know prior.
Yeah.
But if I just went out and met them, didn't tell my partner I was going for that coffee, technically that's cheating by our standards. Yeah. That's dishonest. While his style is a little bit different, he's not really someone who's going to go out, have a coffee, then go back. If it's going to happen.
Have that much forethought.
Yeah, if it's going to happen, it's going to be on a random night out and he happens to meet someone who's keen. Yeah. And then whoop. So I'm like, okay, you don't need to text me prior, because to me that just seems like I'm at home and I get a text that it's an old go. I'm like, I don't really need. I said, tell me afterwards. So we have our rules. But so you can still technically break trust and cheat in an E&M.
Absolutely. That's the other thing. People are like, so you can just do whatever you want whenever you want. It's like, no, like we still, my partner needs a lot of, they have autism, and so they need to know things ahead of time so they can prepare and all these sorts of things. So for us, we were even trying to like tee up our dates at the same time. So one wouldn't be left at home, like twiddling their thumbs. But they tend to work weekends and I work weekdays. And so my only free time is the weekends, and vice versa. So as of the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to kind of navigate how we change that, because, so it can work for both of us. So now I can like date on weekends and they can date on weekdays. But again, we still got to give prior notice, like, a week in advance, and which can be sometimes hard when you're, trying to link up with somebody else and like, oh, I'll just like let you know, we'll just touch base later on. And usually like I'm fine with that, but it's like, no, you kind of need to let me know now so I can like check and like book it in. And
have you ever had, because I know I've had this, where I've kind of loosely arranged to, like I've met up with someone my partner knows about, and then we're like loosely arranged, oh yeah, like I'd be keen to put in a date. And then something happens between me and my partner, completely unrelated, and it's like, and I just know to myself, this isn't the right time. Do you know what I mean? And then so I think you need to be aware of when it's the right time to do it and it's not.
Yeah.
And I think that can be a consideration people don't really realize. It's not always just like, oh, well, fuck it. Yeah. Because if things aren't, I always say to people, don't play unless things are good at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's times when I'm talking and I'm like, I can just tell it's not the right time, or there's been times when my partner's like, I'm not feeling that great, this month. Are we able to just kind of close it down? there's also been times when I've been like out the door, you know, bye, like all good, out the door, and then get a text as I'm downstairs about to get in the Uber. Actually, I'm not okay. Like, do you mind if you come back? And of course, I head back. There's been times where we've been in the middle of play and they're like, nope, not feeling it. So I'm like, sorry, do you mind if we're just going to end it there for tonight, blah, blah. But I think always being open to how they're feeling has just built trust, and it's just, kind of strengthened our relationship and strengthened the E&M that we have. And then it's just, then allowed us to just kind of keep going.
Because I think everyone, especially when they start out with E&M and you're the one at home and your partner's the one out on the date and you get the butterflies in the tummy thing, like, how do you deal with that? Do you know where it comes from? Because also it comes from different places for people. Because I actually asked this to my husband recently. Actually, it was on our anniversary time away. Because he had admitted that when I go and meet up with people separately, sometimes he feels like nervous a bit. And I was like, I'm like, that's good that you've identified that emotion. He's like, yeah, I don't really know why. And I'm like, well, maybe because I've been in the lifestyle longer than him and he's never really had a serious relationship E&M. But he didn't really know where it came from. And then we were kind of we went there on our anniversary weekend away. And I said, dig deeper. What are the butterflies about? Is it about you worried that I'm going to go off with this person, or is it something to do with that? He's like, no, not at all. Like, I know we're soulmates. I know exactly what we have. There's no way you'd ever leave that. I'm like, well, I was like relieved. I'm like, thank God. He's like, I'm wondering whether you'll enjoy it more. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's your ego. I was so happy because I'm like, oh good, this is a you problem. And so it was his ego. So like, do you know where your butterflies come from if you get them?
Oh, it'll definitely be ego. Ego. But then, I mean, this was kind of controversial as well because my partner would mainly date women and, then started to date a man. And that's when I started to feel nervous. So I brought that, I was like, I feel a bit nervous. And they were kind of quite pissed off the fact that I would get, because they're gender fluid as well. So, for me to see things so binary was, which I totally get, but it was something that was ingrained in me and, I've been having to work on that. So, it was interesting. I would only get jealous or get butterflies when they would date.
Yeah, I asked him that because he said it happened with both,
right,
the female and the male.
Yeah.
So.
And then, I don't know, then something started to switch in my mind because then I would then imagine them having sex. And, be like, and then something about it started to turn me on. So now I get this like weird, jealous, horny thing going on. And I don't know if that's like a good solution, but it seems to like fix things. And then I also was like worried about, would they, enjoy their company and something about that just was like, all right, well, be on your game. Like, be the best partner, be everything that you say you're going to be. And if they still decide to go somewhere else, then like fair play. But if you've done everything, you can then.
That's such a beautiful way to word it because I always say if someone's going to leave you, they're going to leave you. Whether you're ethical non-monogamy or monogamous, if someone's going to leave you, they're going to leave you. And so you can't do anything about that. But you're right. The only thing you can do is control what you're doing, and which is be the best partner I'm going to be. And then at least you know that if that day doesn't come where they choose to leave someone, even if it is for someone they date. I remember when I worked in corporate, I think I knew of 3 different people who had affairs who left their partners. So it's not like it doesn't happen in the normal world. It happens probably more often. But at least if you're owning what you're doing and your actions and be a really supportive partner, well, at the end of the day, at least you can walk away and think, well, I did my best.
Yeah.
What has been some judgments from people about your relationship, like the one now or even previous ones? Like, have you had people come up to you? I mean, apart from you can fuck anyone, but is there any things you notice that people maybe think you're not as serious about each other, or this is like because you haven't found the one? Like, has anyone ever?
Yeah, that's one I heard. That was the one that made me relapse. It's like, you haven't found the one that can give you all these things. This is why you're dating multiple people, to get all these things, but I can provide all of these things to you. Not the case. That also, yeah, there's going back to there's something wrong with you. Like, you've got issues, something about your parenting, or something where you need love, like you don't feel loved, so you need to go get counselling for that. That they're pretty the main two that I've experienced, but I'm sure people experience. Yeah.
I mean, I think, people also forget that monogamy marriage is quite a short blip on human history when we take into account like human existence into the world. And we were for many millions of years living in tribal cultures. And many, there's plenty of sexual evolution books out now. There's plenty of proof, and there are some primitive tribes who have remained like untouched, who do still live in these kind of polyamorous societies for many reasons.
And vice versa. Like, I used to bang on about that, but it's also been discovered that, some did mate for life and all these kind of things. So it's like, naturally through human history, we had this like plethora of relationship styles until religion came in and then, instilled this one way of being the right way.
And agriculture. The biggest thing they said that affected especially in female rights, was agriculture. Like, that completely fucked us up, because that brought in the concept of ownership, and that put women inside the house, men on the fields, and that completely like ruined everything. But you're right. Humans have lived in different forms, and I'm definitely not someone who's anti-monogamous. I always say monogamy is like yoga. You choose to practice it. I just happen to hate yoga. So I definitely believe that you can be monogamous. But I can't even say the word. Believe you can be monogamous. But it's a choice.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people don't realize, is that you do have a choice, and it doesn't have to be the one way that church or society or your parents have told you it needs to be. It can be what it means to you. And as long as I think you're not hurting anyone and you're happy and being an authentic, honest person, then why not? Like, why not write your own rules?
Exactly. And like, you don't even have to fall into any of these categories. You could be monogamous where you have like hall passes or something. Like, the beauty is you can talk to your partner, figure out what their desires are, what are your desires, put them on a plate, and see where you can come to some common ground. And I think that's the main thing that's missing from monogamous relationships, is they enter into this thing where everybody knows the unwritten laws, and then you don't say anything about it after that. And I remember talking about this with somebody at a party. I think it might have been at your house. And the guy was like cheating on his wife, and he was King Dick.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And I was like, why are you cheating? He's like, 15 years. I'm like, 15 years with that? You think she's happy? And we're kind of chatting, and then I was coming out of the bathroom, and he pulled me aside. He's like, mate, what was that? What was that thing you were talking about that I should have with my wife? Like, what did you say it's called? I said, an open, honest conversation. He's like, yes, that's the thing. How do I have that? And I think that's something that people struggle about, is just, how do I bring up the topic? How do I, which can be really tough. It's about just creating a safe space for that to happen, so either party isn't being bombarded. So my partner and I, we have, we do this thing once a month called, what do we call it? I just know it's in the calendar.
Monthly check-in?
Yeah, it's like a monthly check-in.
Check-in.
Life dinner.
Yeah.
We call it a life dinner.
Yeah.
And so every month, it's just an opportunity for us to check in, how we're feeling. Is there anything else you want to explore? Or it's just like a time to like, let's get it on the table. And so we're both like clear, present. We know we've got this time, and that's been great. Like I said, this is like the longest relationship I've ever been in now, and it's happiest and healthiest, and it's great, though it's the most, I guess, what do you call it? Not normal.
Well,
But
they
what's
say
normal these days?
alternative lifestyle, but I'm like, what's an alternative lifestyle really? But But it's interesting, you said about monogamy. People go into monogamy and they never have a discussion about it because it's the norm, I guess, in inverted commas. But because we're writing our own rules in something, it means you've got to make the rules, which means you've got to talk about it. So I think you actually get a little bit of a bonus help in your relationship purely by the nature of the construct. Because, hey, society didn't write the rules for this, or the current society didn't write the rules for this, what are we going to make it? And a lot of people don't enter a relationship ever having that conversation. What do you expect from this relationship? What do I expect from this relationship? Yeah. So I think that's really important. Just like wrapping up with society, do you see it changing? Like I think I said earlier, I think it's definitely way more talked about than we started off. Like what's your experience in people's reactions to it, people you're finding more in the scene, what direction do you think it's taking?
Yeah, I think it's definitely more prevalent. I think more people have an understanding or actually have a clue about what you're talking about. I think, just on dating apps, you see it a ton in bios now, or, if I meet people and I tell them my situation, they're like, yep, that's great. I've dated somebody like that, or, my friends are like that. So a lot more people are starting to have an understanding, which I think it's great. Especially for me, I don't have to do the education thing all the time. Typically I just kind of date people that truly kind of get it and yeah, just kind of sympathetic to the situation, understanding of my partner and the way we are. And so I think it can only get better.
Definitely. Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been a great chat. And to all you at home, as always, stay kinky.